Hey everyone, are you ready to talk money? Because today we are diving deep into something that I know we all could use a little help with. Budgeting.
For sure.
We had a listener write in and ask us to unpack an episode they listened to called Building Financial Success. I gave it a listen, and I have to say, they're laying down some really great groundwork for creating a budget that actually, works.
Yeah, there's a ton of information out there, so it's good to focus on what's going to be most impactful.
It's so easy to get bogged down in all the details, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think sometimes people hear the word budget and they immediately think restrictive or like no fun allowed.
Yeah, it definitely has that connotation.
But this podcast flipped the script on that. They actually emphasized that a budget is really a tool for freedom.
I like that.
It's about taking control of your money so your money doesn't control you. And they make this really great comparison. They say a budget is like a roadmap.
Oh, I love that.
Right, because you wouldn't, start driving across country without a roadmap, would you?
Mm.
Your budget is your financial roadmap. It helps you reach your goals, that dream vacation, buying a house, or even just like a weekend getaway without ending up in a ditch of debt.
It's so true. And just like you need to know your starting point on a map, before you can even think about where you want to go with your spending, you have to know your income.
Okay, so figure out, how much money is coming in. Gotcha.
And not just any income. They really hammer this home. Your net income.
Oh, right. Right. After taxes?
Exactly. It can be kind of depressing to actually do the math.
It really is. It's like, oh, that's what I'm actually working with.
Right. But it's essential to building that financial roadmap.
Right.
And for anyone with irregular income, like freelancers, they suggest calculating an average from your recent months.
Yeah, that makes sense. That way you're working with a realistic number, even if your paychecks fluctuate.
Exactly. You've got to have a clear picture of what you're working with.
Okay, so know your net income. That's like step one.
Yeah.
What about all those, pesky expenses?
Ugh, right. Those are the weeds we've got to tackle.
They can really sneak up on you.
They really can. So the podcast encourages everyone to get up close and personal with their spending habits, which I think can be a little eye-opening, to say the least.
It's true. Awareness is key.
Huge. They talk about two main categories of expenses, fixed and variable. Fixed are those non-negotiables.
Okay, so rent, utility.
Exactly, those essential bills. Then you've got your variable expenses, which are a little bit more, shall we say, flexible.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about these fixed versus variable expenses.
So think of your fixed expenses like, I don't know, like that friend who always orders the most expensive thing on the menu. Like, it's coming and you got to factor it in.
Okay, I think we all have that friend.
Right. And your variable expenses are more like that spontaneous friend, always up for an adventure, which can be fun, but it can also drain your bank account faster than you can say happy hour.
And that's what gets a lot of this, right? Those small, insignificant, everyday purchases, your morning latte, that afternoon snack, it all adds up so fast.
Oh, for sure. The podcast actually calls it death by 1,000 coffees, which I think is pretty spot on.
That's such a good way to put it. So once you've, wrapped your head around where your money's going, you can start to make smarter decisions.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've laid the groundwork. We know our income. We're tracking our expenses. But how do we take it to the next level? How do we build this into an actual working budget?
So the podcast I listened to had a really, I don't know, it's just a good way to think about it. They use this framework: needs, wants, and savings.
Okay, I like that. It's simple but effective, right? Break it down for me.
Right. So you've got your basic needs, and those are the non-negotiables.
You need a roof over your head.
Yes. Housing, food, transportation, keeping the lights on, all
Yeah.
that good stuff. You've got to prioritize those first. And then comes your savings goals.
Right, because if you wait until the end of the month to see what's left over, you're probably not going to have much to save.
Exactly. Pay yourself first. You can't pour from an empty cup, as they say.
I love that. Okay, so needs, then savings.
And then the fun part, the wants.
That new pair of shoes, a dinner out?
Yes, all the things that bring you joy. The key here is to allocate accordingly. Don't go spending all your money on wants before you've covered those needs and savings goals.
Makes total sense. But how do you actually, put a number on each of those categories?
Well, that's where step 4 comes in setting spending limits. And the podcast really emphasized this isn't about depriving yourself. It's more about being realistic and making conscious choices.
Okay, I like where you're going with this. So how do we do that?
So they say, look at your income after you've covered your essential needs and your savings goals. And then you essentially divide what's left over between your various want categories.
So if someone has, let's say, $1,000 left over after they've paid their bills and put money into savings, how should they think about dividing that up?
They actually give a really specific example in the podcast. They base it off a $2,800 monthly income, and they subtract like $1,800 for fixed expenses.
So that leaves you with $1,000, right?
Yeah. And then they allocated $300 to savings, $400 to variable needs, groceries, gas, that kind of thing, which leaves $300 for wants.
That's so helpful. Giving people those concrete numbers makes it so much easier to visualize.
I agree. It makes it feel much more doable.
Totally. Okay, so we've got our income sorted, expenses categorized, spending limits set, boom.
Yeah.
Budget conquered. We're
Yep.
done here, right?
Not quite. And this is where I think a lot of people, myself included, sometimes stumble a bit.
Because life happens.
Exactly. You might get a surprise bonus or, your car might decide it's time for a major repair.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
Right. So our financial situations are constantly changing, and that's why the podcast really stressed this point. Regular review and adjustment. Your budget needs to be adaptable.
It's a living document.
Exactly. So they actually recommend checking in with your budget monthly or even more often if needed to see what's working, what's not working, and then, make adjustments.
You got to be able to roll with the punches, right? Like stuff comes up.
It always does. But when you get in that habit of reviewing and adjusting, budgeting becomes less of a chore. It almost becomes empowering.
Totally. And that actually reminds me of another point the podcast made. It's not just about like tracking every penny. Your budget should really be tied to your own goals.
Oh, absolutely. It's like your budget is the vehicle that will take you to your destination.
Right.
Where are you even trying to go, right?
Exactly. So let's say you want to buy a house. Your budget can help you figure out how much you need to save for a down payment.
Exactly. Or if you are trying to, finally get out of debt,
That's a big one.
it can help you put more money towards paying down those balances faster.
Oh, for sure. And the podcast really does a good job. Like, it gives you a framework, but it doesn't feel restrictive. You know what I mean?
It definitely doesn't. They make it really clear that, it's a journey, not a race.
Exactly. You take it
Yeah.
one step at a time, start where you are, embrace those aha moments, and celebrate the small wins.
So true.
Mm.
Speaking of those aha moments, I have a question for everyone listening.
Ooh, I love a good question. Hit us with it.
What are your top financial goals right now?
Oh, I love that. Because once you actually identify those goals, whether it's saving up for something, paying off debt, finally taking that dream trip, you can use this budgeting framework as a tool to actually achieve those dreams.
Exactly. It's all about taking control and making your money work for you, not the other way around.
It's about aligning your money with your values.
100%.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into budgeting basics.
Yes. But remember, the learning and growing doesn't stop here. Keep those financial goals in mind.
Don't be afraid to adjust as you go. Remember, financial freedom isn't about restriction. It's about making choices that empower you to live your best life. So go out there, take control of your finances, and happy budgeting, everyone.